Today's guest is Ukamaka Olisakwe, founder and editor-in-chief of Isele Magazine. We go behind the scenes and discuss what it takes to run a literary magazine. And we discuss everything from funding to dealing with AI-generated submissions. Take a listen. Before we get into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to let you know that this podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. So feel free to listen on the go or download it for later. Being an artist can be a heck of a ride, but you're not alone. On Journey of the Art, we tell inspiring stories of artists and chat with those who support us on this path. I'm your host, Lola Opataya, writer, editor, singer, and all-round lover of words. Come with me on the journey. Hello again, and welcome once again. I already said again, but welcome to Journey of the Arts. And today I'm so excited, delighted in fact, to speak with Ukamaka Olisakwe. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lola. This is such an honor, and I hope we have a enjoyable conversation. Really, yes. I was looking.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure we're going to have an enjoyable conversation. We're going to talk about Isele Magazine and all the amazing work that you've been doing so far. And like I said to you before we hit record, we're going to peel back all the layers of a literary magazine. We want to know, what does it take to run a literary magazine? What are some curveballs that you've experienced? And what do people need to know about the workings of a literary magazine? So let's start at the very beginning. Isele was launched in 2020 in the middle of a very strange year, a very scary year, in fact. And I was just wondering, how did that happen and what made you do it anyway?
Yes, thank you so much for this question. So I had taken a class with Rob Spillman. He is the co-founder of Teen House Magazine. He was the co-founder of Teen House Magazine because Teen House Magazine is no longer here with us. Yeah. So he had visited my college where I was getting my MFA, and I took this class with him on publishing, and it was an eye opener for me because all these years I've been nursing this idea of launching a literary magazine. Of years before that, I think it was in 2013, I had the Isele spoken word competition for spoken word artists. I had attended a spoken word performance in Abuja. So that was DK Chukwumeri J. It was fascinating. So I came back and I collaborated with, I reached out to Dami Ajayi, who was then the co-editor of Saraba. Yes, yeah. So I reached out to him and they were very supportive. He was running Saraba with, I think, Ayobimi Adebayo and Emmanuel Iduma. So they were very supportive and did that, and it was excellent. But then after that, I was constantly thinking about enlarging this, making it something more permanent and consistent. But I didn't know how to do that until I went to get my master's in creative writing. And then I took the class with Rob Spillman, and he took us in entirely opened this world of publishing and what worked for them in Teen House, realizing that the project started even in a very small space and it's very eager, enthusiastic, amazing people wanting to publish weird art, publish, brilliant people, and the mistakes they made, the things they learned, their successes. So it took us, and then even had us design literary magazines in the classroom. He gave us all the tools we needed. So after I was done taking that class, it occurred to me that I have to just get this done. Yes, I was working on my thesis, which was a book of creative nonfiction. But then I think Isele Magazine was my actual thesis, because after I took that class, I began to really put down ideas about how to go about doing this. That I don't need to have two heads to run a literary magazine. I just need the zeal. So that was how we started. Yeah. So when I completed my master's in May in 2020, I decided, okay, now I'm going to actually work on my thesis, which is my actual thesis, which is Isele Magazine. I didn't have the money to pay for the web hosting and all that. I had to scrounge for
Wow.
funds, like reach out to friends,
Wow.
to be able to get all the things I needed. And one key person who really, I maybe I have not sang his praise as much as I should. I think I will be doing that. Is Kelechi Oza. He was
Mm.
an amazing human being, and he is still one of my best friends in the world today. So Kenichi, was there to support, like, what do you need? And I told him the idea, and he volunteered to join in as an editor to help me because you can't do
Yeah.
this all by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
excited
For
and
sure.
enthusiastic for me. I reached out to a few friends in my masters, Rebecca Jennison, Tracy Hott, who is serving as our fiction editor currently. So I reached out to them. And for a start, we had to solicit because I realized something I learned from Rob Spillman is to start with a big bang, right? To reach out to people who are doing amazing things in the industry. So I reached out to them, and surprisingly, they gave me their stories. Isia Sondo, Chika Oniwe. I also had emerging writers who were so fascinating, like Esther Ifesinachi, Kunko,
Yeah.
like they all gave me their stories. So we launched on the 30th of July. And when we launched, you will not believe it, because it was at the peak of the pandemic. I could also call it having existential crisis because, like, are we going to die? Are we going to survive this pandemic? Might as well just do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we launched on the 30th, and on that particular day, I got on the bus to my PhD. So I was on the bus for almost 2 days because I couldn't get it
Wow.
directly. I was on the bus almost 2 days, following the progress of Isele, the conversation. And now finally we are here.
Wow. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. I think it's so important. And this is what struck me the most about, that background story is it's so important when teachers teach, the
Yes.
practicals. Like, what does it actually
Yeah.
take? Don't just tell me the theory. How do I get it done? And I love the fact that you backed that practical instruction up with zeal, and those connections. And I really like the fact that you mentioned that he talked about the mistakes that they made,
Yes.
and I'm gonna get into that in a while. But I love the fact that you had that instruction, that guidance from the start, and such an amazing story. And you guys have done such great work in 4 years. So your work has been so good that the New York Times has described Isele as one of the new magazines and journals shaping Africa's literary scene. How did that make you feel when you first read
Oh,
it?
Lola, you have no idea. I was screaming.
Oh,
I
I
was
can imagine.
screaming. I saw that, and it was a good pat on the back. When you're doing something, and people are like, you are doing well. And by people, I mean people, your friends. And in a way, you're like, yeah, that's the thing. That's what you should tell me. So it's
Yeah,
expected. But then when I go on
yeah,
social media, I see the reactions, and it made me feel good. And then to get that validation from that outlet was I think it added fire, or will I say added fuel to my fire, because I realized Ukamaka Isele must never fail. Like,
yeah,
yeah, Isele will outlive me. Like, people who are coming in the future will take over from by the time I am done. And
yeah,
it was such a huge step forward that for the very first time back then we got that no, acknowledgement. What I didn't realize is that I have to structure Isele in a way that even when I'm not here, other people will continue. Even if I'm infirm, God forbid it, or if I'm not here, I am not available, that we will have people who will continue running Isele, right? And that is what we have done. We have done, yeah, having, and also making sure that our categories, our segments are not, because we have the general issues, and when we have
yeah,
quarterlies. So, and those are independent, not independent, but we still work together. But we have directors, running those two categories, so that even if I'm held up, at work, they can still do their work without needing to constantly be in conversation with editor in chief. So, but before we go live, then we have the conversation. Well, these are the things we are putting out. How do we then, with publicity, editing, all that? But yeah, that validation made me reassess the way each seller is structured, and
Yeah.
Yeah, and also realizing that this thing must be here in the next 100 years at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that proactivity and that long-term vision, because I think sometimes we just start something, and while starting is good, we don't think about
Yes,
longevity. What happens, when I'm not
yes,
here? How does this thing live as long as it possibly
yes.
can? And I really like that. I want to talk about some of the challenges that surprised you, because yes, Rob Spillman did share about some mistakes that they made, but what are some things that really surprised you when you started the magazine, and how did you solve them?
Yes, I'll start with the good surprises. I think the good surprises for me getting submissions from people across the world. Uh,
Mm.
Last year, we were going through our stats, our statistics, and you will not believe it. We've gotten views, audience from over 130 countries.
Wow.
Yes,
In 4 years, that is
over 100,
very
yeah, over
impressive.
130 countries, people reading our work. Like I have my phone here, and even like we've had more of that this year. And then we've gotten submissions from places I never would have imagined, right? The challenge then is how to capture voices cross board, um, without, you know, without being too scatterbrained, to make
Mm.
them cohere, which was why we came up with the idea of the quarterlies. So the quarterlies that are themed, our general issues are more open. So you're not responding to any central questions. So the challenge then is sometimes when the challenge we continue to have, which we somehow continue to surmount, is for the themed issues. Sometimes you wonder if you're going to get enough submissions to be able to
Right.
select from that pool. And then, but for the general submission, you get varieties. So you have more chances of, if you're going to have, say, 6 stories in this general issue, because our general issues, we publish them every other month. So if we're going to have good stories from the general issues, so okay, fine. But then for the quarterly issues, sometimes, like, I think one of the best quarterly issues we've published this year is the grief issue. We got amazing submissions. Then we have a new issue, a call for submission for the quarterly out open, and the
Yeah.
submissions are trickling
Yeah.
in.
I did see that.
Yes, they're trickling in
And what is the deadline for that
at the end
submission
of
cycle?
October. So yes,
Okay.
I will also have to discuss with the chair of our the quarterly issue, the editor, about the possibility of maybe extending by a week. So suppose some people, the responses we were getting is, oh, now I have to go and start writing this story, which is good. It's very encouraging for people to say, oh,
Yeah.
I can write something that will respond to this call. We want people
Yeah.
to also spend time with their stories to make it, to
Yeah.
have it, not just workshop in a professional setting, but with your friends, right?
Yeah.
Before you turn it in, because sometimes you see the submissions that are rushed, they are trying to respond.
Mm.
So the challenge really is a question of time, and a question of the audience, responding to every specific call. But I think it's something that other magazines have to constantly deal with, because something that we don't want to do is to run a magazine that is mostly soliciting materials from, friends or professional or people within their own network. So when that happens, is that you keep having the same set of people published everywhere,
Yes.
right? So solicitation is good because then you already know the quality of the person's work and you're reaching out to them. But it also does something which is not good to the other, to people out there who wanting
Yes.
to have their work appear in the magazine. So they take up spots for other people. So we don't want to run a solicitation run magazine. um, yes, so we don't want to magazine, no, but we could have solicitation, maybe like a special issue, reach out to
Yeah.
respond to that. So this is the challenge in terms of
Yeah.
submissions that we continue to manage. The other one, of course, money.
Yeah.
is the
Yeah. Yeah.
is the cost of
Yeah.
running the magazine, of for not just the hosting of the site, but also the
Yeah.
paying, because we are committed to paying writers, even though we don't pay much. We're not getting money from anyone. Like occasionally we do get support from friends. They're like, oh,
You're not funded by anyone?
No, we're not funded by anyone. Funded by my salary.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. So because funding the arts is it's a huge task, and
Yeah.
yes, and also we've applied it once we applied. Occasionally, we apply for some funding, and we don't get them because everyone is applying for the same funding, right? But then we're not going to stop asking for funding, right? The other challenge with asking for funding in the United States for me, because I'm on a work visa, right? Um, which I hope situation changes soon. That way, Isele becomes a much more legal entity because there are rules for
Hmm.
IRS. Like, um, for now, it feels like a pet project since I'm living here in the
Yeah.
United States. Yes, but
Yeah.
Isele actually
Yeah.
runs. It's registered in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So mostly based on the continent. So the issue of money, I've been able to handle that. Occasionally, you get support from friends. Occasionally support from well wishers. Occasionally
Hmm.
once in a while, but to keep the magazine up and running every day, I have to fund it, and I am yeah, and
Wow.
I am
That
yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah, and I am happy, which is why when I got my job, so I'm now an assistant professor, yeah.
Yes, I saw that. Congrats.
When I got my job, yeah, people are like, congratulations, God, your life will become better. Like you have no idea what you're talking about. Isele will become better because now I know Isele will be here as long as I have a job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, and also no, it opens up opportunity for me to also ask for help from my department. I haven't done that, but one day I'm going to go to them. Hey, please come and help Isele any way you can.
Yeah.
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 So, but also
Yeah.
knowing that the steadiness, that this almost like the permanence, in a sense, this
Yeah.
of this job gives Isele a much longer life.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that struggle to fund your dream because you believe so much in
Mm.
it. And even when it looks like, I don't have much, the quality has to remain the quality, right? So I can totally relate to that need to fund your dream, and kudos to you on surmounting those challenges. I think you're gonna do great. Um, let's talk about your submission cycles because you were just talking about that, but I just wanted to get a little bit more into that. How many stories do you typically receive for each submission cycle?
And for the general submissions, we get a lot. For the themed submissions, the quarterly issues depend on the call. Take example for our grief issue, we got close to 500 submissions
Wow.
for that, and we needed just about 15 stories.
Wow. And how many editors are reviewing
Oh yeah,
that
we have
pool?
Yvonne who is running it, and then we have assistant editors who are helping, supporting in the way they can.
Yeah.
So we have me, we have Winifred, we have Chidera, you know, mostly the four of us because Tracy also, and then we have Emma Babikwa, he's also there. So what we do is when we've made selections, then the
Mm-hmm.
task of editing that, sometimes we have almost like an overlap between the general issues because the general issues are every other month, which we are going to restructure that in the next
Mm-hmm.
publishing year in 2025, so that we'll have less of an overlap. So
Mm.
we have the quarterlies, they come out in December, April, August, April, May, June, July, August, and then we have three times
Okay.
a year. Then we have in December again. So reading them, editing them, it's such a
Yeah.
huge task. But
Yeah.
but one thing that happens with submissions, no matter how much you get, once you've been doing this for a very long time, you are able to tell if a story will be successful without having to read the entire story. Because
Really? How can you
okay,
tell?
so and this is a trick I learned from Rob Spillman, having worked with
Okay.
them. There was this scenario he painted for us that I really loved. He said that when he reads a story, just the first paragraph, he knows if he wants to continue reading that story.
Yeah.
By the first page, he knows he wants to keep reading this story. By the second
Yeah.
page, he is sucked in completely. First, we're talking about language, you're talking about grammar, you have a lot. So when a story is not carefully thought out, even though you don't have a sense of what the inciting incident is, or you don't have a sense of what the drama is at the part of the story, but from the organization of that story, the way they care for language, right from the first paragraph, it pulls you in. So you sit down and you want to keep reading. This is where situation where you now get to reading a story, you realize that you're on the 10th page of that story.
Yeah.
So stories that announce themselves that way, you can tell right from the first paragraph, and it's true for every story. You don't have to know what is the big question is, the character motivation. You don't, all those mechanics that we always look out for, the dramatic questions we ask for when we are reading stories. You don't get that answer from the first page, but what you get is a sense of language. You get a sense of care. You know that this person really sat down and thought about this thing. You see the movement from sentence to sentence. Yes, we do appreciate florid sentences, but when you see a sentence that is doing the work, moving the story forward, you just know, right? It's like reading a Jamel Brinkley story. Even from the first paragraph, you could have clues, because he usually leaves clues. In the first paragraph, you get a sense of where this is going. But then it's just the personality of the character, because even the voice, the character background, the character's personality is reflected in the voice and in the attitude, the character of the voice itself. So when we are reading stories and the story does that right from the first paragraph, we just know this story is going to be good. So you just keep reading. But when a story is, there's certain stories you read, almost like you're reading an AI generated story. Like there's no sense of character, there's no sense of purpose, that everything is just all over the place. And you know that sometimes you read it and you realize this writer, there's a soul here, but they need time. We've done that. I've done that a lot especially with our essay submissions, nonfiction, because we're constantly looking out for very good creative nonfiction. I don't want to mention names. There are certain essays you will read, you realize that this person has so much to tell, but they are not doing it right. They need some sort of guidance, right? I've done that a lot and it takes time. So now you're going back, you reach out to them rather than just rejecting and say, oh, we're not accepting. Because if you open up with, oh, they've always wanted to appear in Isele Magazine. And you know that the resources they need, they don't have it immediately. And you can be that resource to them. So rather than just say no, to the submission, which can be very crushing to the writer. Especially when the writer has a lot of things to say to the world. So sometimes I've done that on a few occasions. I reach out, okay, first of all, ask the permission. Would you want to work with me on this essay? I see what you're trying to do here, but I think you can do something better, and you have so much soul, you have so much to tell. They're always very excited. Yes, absolutely. And then working on essays. So working.
I think that is wonderful, though. I don't know anywhere that I've submitted to where, okay, there is one place where they did say, we really like this, but we think it needs a little more something. They didn't know what the something was, but nobody has ever said to me, we're willing to work with you on this. So I think that is really wonderful.
Especially for that you do that. When you know that they need this. We don't have expensive, we don't have all this elite writing workshops at home. And this was something I needed. When I started writing for the very first time, the reason why I do this, the reason why I do this is because of writers who supported me when that was back in 2009. I would send them a message on Facebook. Hey, I read the story. Please, would you read it and tell me if this is working? Some don't even respond. Some said really nasty things like, yeah, do you think I'm here to do, your bidding or something? But there are writers who actually responded. 2009 to Ukamaka Olisakwe. One of them is Okindibe. They read my story and then reached out. There's so much in the story. Yes, And then started giving me sort of guidance, because then I have no idea of what the world of story should be doing. I know what I wanted to say, but how to go about saying it, right? And then somebody else that also really helped was Richard Ali.
Oh, I know him. Yeah.
Oh, Richard Ali was such an amazing friend, an amazing resource. The way he helped shape even my first ever published short story. So when I see such submissions, see that, and I know this now our people now. Our people,
They need that help.
they need that
Yeah.
support, and when you
Yeah.
keep getting a no, 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 you realize that maybe this is not for me, but that's not true. I strongly believe that people can be taught how to tell stories. I
think so
strongly
too.
believe that. The point is understanding what a story, how to put together a story. So long as you have patience, and so long as you have dedication and you have a flair for language, you love words, you can put together a story. So
Yeah, I totally agree. So what gaps do you see of these submissions that you've received over the years? What gaps do you see in today's storytelling? Or phrased differently, what kind of stories do you think the world needs right now?
I think the world needs more of the stories that, especially stories that aren't published in elite magazines, because getting access to those outlets is often very difficult. Some writers, sometimes we aspire, right? We aspire to perspire. So we aspire, we have these dreams of having our work out there in magnificent places. But then what happens then is that we begin to write the kind of stories we see appearing in those outlets. So what it does, inadvertently, is that it shapes our storytelling. It sort of polices the kind of story we tell about ourselves. So maybe I wanted to write about, literary mystery novel with this, this DPR investigating investigating this murder. But then because I realized that, maybe they don't want to read that, I will now write a contemporary story set in the United States, because it will get me access to publishing. But one thing that is happening now is that we have lots of literary magazines out there. And I love it when I see people, doing something extraordinarily different from out there. So that's the gaps that I see is not gaps really. The challenge is wanting to write to mimic certain, lineage, because it will get us access, it will get us into the door. But with this outlet that we have now, the try magazines out there, Lowe, Iskanchi, The Work, Ubuali, all these magazines coming out, we are now beginning to tell our people, yes, your story is lovely, please give it to us to publish. So when you start from there, then you can start building, your overall, what do you want to keep telling? So now what it's doing is you start off by telling the kind of story you want to tell, because you have houses who are willing to accept those, which is why it's important for us to have our own magazines, like our own magazines that are dedicated to our people. Isele Magazine is looking to publish an anthology of short stories by African writers.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, like doing that, and not that way we are defining, just like we have the best American defining, the legend, also the legacy of the American story, what American story should look like, or an American essay should look like. But have our own. We really have Kim Price, doing the work with a Price, but having our own home-based, this creating this division, creating this work, it will that way we will be responding to our own cultural questions, and we will be defining our story based on our own ideas, and also the way we tell our own stories. Most of our storytelling form adheres to the Western literary canon, the idea of, show, don't tell, this is what the story should be doing, this is when you introduce what, this is when you do what, this is what you do with language. But we come from a rural tradition, and we have seen writers, mixing both, like a story that looks like it is telling you the story and not showing you the story. Some writers, they mix both. And then, I think that's I don't see the gaps anymore because we have more magazines coming out and publishing this work. Ubuali, it's founded by my friend Mubanga, and publishes mostly Zambian writers. Like you read their work, you're like, oh, you can actually do this with storytelling. So not everyone wearing the same, shaving our hair or cutting our hair the same way because this is the way they define storytelling for us. So that's a long way of saying yes.
No, I totally get that, because when I'm reviewing manuscripts as well, I can't say what organization, but when I review submissions, I see that, especially from writers from the African continent, I see that pandering to what might be accepted, and I do understand it. As a writer myself, I understand everybody wants to be successful, and so logically you want to go in the direction of what looks like success, right? And you strip your originality on the way to becoming something that you hope would give you that success. So I totally get that. What is one thing that you wish writers knew about the submission process?
Give people.
I know there's a lot of things.
Honestly, one thing I wish they all know is patience. Patience. And patience comes with giving other people your work to read. It takes a community to build something beautiful. Like, we have writers who sit down and write their masterpiece. Like, I think was it Beethoven? I can't remember, one of those pianists who wrote an entire, wrote it without editing it and having, revisiting it. But you have to return to your material. So it's once in a lifetime that you get that. I don't know any successful, and by successful, I'm not talking about commercially successful, like success in terms of storytelling itself in the field, who writes something and just sends it out without letting someone else read it. There are stories that you will read and no one else will read this. The writer wrote it and was so confident in themselves and then sent it. Receiving feedback, it takes a lot of you have to discipline yourself so that you don't get emotional, because sometimes it's very hard. But I would take that hard feedback over turning in something that should not even be turned in. There are stories that I wrote when maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. When I wrote those stories, I felt like I was the best storyteller in the world. I'm not joking with you, Lola. Like I read, I'm like, this is a masterpiece. This is going to win all the awards in the world. And then for some reason, I moved on to something else and I left those stories. Or maybe I submitted to a magazine and I received a no, and I was so shattered by it, I never sent those stories out again. Do you know that a few months ago, I returned to my archive, I still have them in my Gmail, returned, and I was reading that story. I was like, Jesus,
how could I have sent this?
I'm so ashamed of myself. That even my students, they will not write something like this. So, but there are certain stories that you read in going through the submissions, and you read them, and I just wish they give that work time. So, which was something I discussed with my student all the time. So they are concluding a unit, and I told them, so one of our vision strategies is to step away from the material, give it time, and then come back. Just step away from it, And then when we talk about revision, like, okay, you like writing using Garamond, which is very pretty and sleek. Change it to Arial, which is ugly as shit. I'm sorry, I'm using the S word here.
That's okay.
So change it to Arial for the ugliest font. So then read it, and does it feel like it's sort of like it does it scrambles, your arrangement and your.
That's a very smart way to do it. Yeah.
And then we also do something like, okay, now print out the story. Like, we chop it up, like we use a scissors to cut, and then rearrange it, pick a random place and just read. How do you feel about this? It also it always helps with structure. They realize sometimes in the first few pages are just exposition, flashback, exposition. They're not actually telling us a story here. Like story is almost like saying action. Like you start with something interesting, right?
Yeah.
So when they do that exercise, it changes the way they look at their stories, and then read it out aloud. Give it to someone. The dialogue sometimes looks pretty on the page, but when when you read it out aloud, you realize that people don't talk like this. This is so. And also, we're looking at the voice. What is even the background and the personality of this character? You're using the first person, but the first person, but they speak differently. Like their voice does not match with the personality and their background or who they really are. Yeah. So, yes, we do all that exercises in the class. I wish other people who submit, because I'm not the only one who sees this. Like, I wish who submit have opportunity to do exercises like that. Give people your work to read and tell them, show me no mercy. Like I will tell my friend who reads my work, please just be very honest with me. Yes, you love me, you like me, you whatever. Put that aside. Be very honest with me. Is this working? If it's not working, so I know what I go back to. So I just wish that something writers who turn in their work go through that process. Because they always have very brilliant ideas, but the problem is in the delivery of that idea.
I totally agree with you, and it sounds very much like what I tell my clients. Like sometimes they just want to get it to this publication date, and I'm like, you need to step away from this. You need to step away from this, because when you step away, then you'll be able to, when you go back and look at it with fresh eyes, you'll be able to see, where places where there are cracks and things that need to be tightened up. So, thank you for sharing that. And this next question is something that you had touched on before. And when you said it, I was like, oh, okay, she already sees me asking this question. So I'm going to ask it now. Have you seen any impact of artificial intelligence on submissions? And if so, how have you handled it? So have people basically chat GPT their submissions and send them to you?
It's expected, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a very fragile conversation, because recently I was, because I like to not to engage, but I like to read what other people think. What other people think about this new thing in our world that is trying to, take the art away from the art, right? So what qualifies as AI generated material? For some people, when you use, say, Grammarly to edit your story, it takes away from the originality, because the app does this thing where it suggests phrases sometimes, or suggests punctuations that, interrupts the reading, the writer's natural reading. And some writers, especially young writers who are not aware of what is actually happening, is that it changes the entire voice. Like the rhythm of the story you begins to read, and then suggesting certain phrases that is very common within as AI language. So it ruins the piece. I tell my students, as much as possible, like I think the first draft of their story, I'm not really keen about how grammatically correct it is. So we are looking, so that can come in the second draft, because we go through 3 drafts, right? But with AI, it's now moved beyond just editing the work. It is now generating the story. So I've had instances where people generated stories, like not even an essay or general submissions that we got. I read this, and immediately something about the language, there's something very robotic about the language, devoid of human emotion. There is this obsession with making it very correct. The grammar is so correct.
It's too precise.
It's too precise. Like that's human quirks that you notice in our work. You don't see it. That thing that gives you personality, that gives you character, it's absent. It is just very sterile, robotic, mechanical, clean. And then there was this repetition of the character's name where the pronouns would have sufficed. So I read it, and I'm, of course, teaching a lot of students and having to deal with AI generated materials, because we get to see those cases. I've not had that with this university I am currently in, but you get to see that constantly, and having conversation like the disciplinary action and all that, the consequence of doing that. So it's so easy for me to spot that. So when I read that essay, an example that we got for our general creative nonfiction. Well, the person is not my student, so it's just an immediate no,
Yeah.
you're not accepting this. And I hope that from the languaging of the rejection, that they get a sense that we know what you're doing without calling anyone out, so that nobody will sue us and accuse,
Yeah.
But there are even sudden checkers that you can run the material and you realize, even if it's just a paragraph, not running someone's story, because it's not right to do that. But you just get a sense like, this is not human language. This is machine language. So we've had that. And then also because we had the lots of instances that we had a mistake once, something that we accepted, but then realized that it is AI generated, was art. So we also call for art. And the person who immediately spotted that was our quarterly editor, Yvonne Wabai. So she immediately noted that and sent a notification to everyone. Hey, this is what's happened. And then, supporting that.
And had this happened before you published or after you published? Was the mistake discovered after publishing or before?
I will hold back that information.
Oh no. The suspense. This is the writer in you is holding me in suspense.
But then, it was such a learning moment, because it was at the start of the whole conversation about AI generated art, right? And then she did something very amazing, that not only just sending an email, but also including resources for us to read, understand how this is being done, how it's depriving writers of their work, the copyright issues, and she came up with this amazing package for us. And it was a learning moment. And so I think other magazines are also going through that motion. But the reason why we can never publish an AI generated stories, because I'm an instructor, right? So and then also I've been dealing with this with my students, and so it's so easy to spot it when you get such submissions. I can't remember the name of the magazine now, but it's a science fiction magazine. At a point they had to stop accepting submissions because they were getting hundreds of submissions, AI generated materials.
Wow.
In fact, at the point, because they stopped accepting, that they're no longer up, the call is no longer open, we're now being trolled by people who were deliberately generating stories, AI, and submitting to the scientific.
So that's something I was going to say, that I think this whole AI and all the things adds a layer of complexity to the submission process that's already tough.
Yes.
Right? Because you're already reading hundreds and hundreds of submissions, and then you have to, on top of that, try to weed out the ones that are artificially generated. So,
and it's unfair, right? It is. It's also emotionally tasking, because something it also does is it creates this layer of this cloud of suspicion when you reach out and you were asking, okay, where is this person coming from, their background, the writer, maybe they used Grammarly to edit, tell ton of phrases, but then did they really do that? But then because of that cloud of suspicion, it ruins opportunities for other people.
That's true.
Which is something that we try as much as possible to avoid at Isele Magazine. But then I think it's going to get worse, because the way the AI is not being constantly generated, we have instances where the companies are actually training the AI, the artificial intelligence, using people's actual work. So I was going through the list. I saw some of my favorite writers, even Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's book was used to train AI. Listed people whose work were breached, using that to train AI, so that they can speak, they can write language or write a story that sounds like what the brilliant Adichie can write. Do you understand? So I think it gets even worse. And something institutions are doing, like my university is doing, like constantly having sessions with us instructors, they turn, so when they noticed a new trend, they train us so that we're able to spot it immediately. So almost like spying.
So I really like that, though. It's such a wonderful intervention.
Yes.
Like, this is what's coming, and this is how you can mitigate that. I really like that, and maybe that's the key. Maybe that's the key to dealing with what looks like a very dicey future.
Yes.
It's learning what the future holds and trying your best to be able to mitigate all of those things. So now let's talk about the team. And I know that you touched a little bit on it before, But I want to talk about what it takes to build a type of magazine that the New York Times speaks so favorably about. What would you say is key to building and sustaining a successful literary magazine?
Yeah, you need a team. You need a very good team, dedicated team, and which is the most difficult part because you're not paying them. You don't have the money to pay them, right? They're
Yeah.
doing that because they love the work, they love the art. They love this process of publishing. But when one does something over and over and they're not getting remunerated for it, they're not getting paid for that work, sometimes they're like, oh, they're exhausted. They reach the peak of that exhaustion. Or I have to step away. I need, other source of funding, and I need, to whatever, to better my life. So that is always a huge challenge for some writers, for some literary magazines. What they do to be able to get through this is to change a circle of editors. So
Right.
for say maybe they are publishing twice a year, they get new sets of editors to run that. When they are publishing the next circle, new set of editors to do that, so that that exhaustion, you won't have it. If you're able to raise funds, you can afford to pay an editor like $100 for the cycle. If you're able to raise funds, you can do that. But for Isele Magazine, we have been tremendously lucky. Lucky in the sense that we've had editors who have stayed with us for a very long time, like Tracy. But Tracy, we're having in-house conversations, and also Yvonne. Chidera has been with us for 2 years now. Winifred is so on fire. Just last year, like Winifred will send me an email. Look at the list of my suggestions for acceptance, rejection, or maybe. So we call it the yes, no, maybe. Could you look at it? Chidera has already read, and could you look at it? And then she'll come back and send me. This is a quick reminder.
So she's very on top
Oh my God,
of
like,
things.
this is a quick reminder that you haven't done this. I hope you're doing well. I'm like, I'm so sorry, Yvonne. Please give me a bit of space. So she's so amazing. So we've had this the current team of editors that we have is so dedicated to the magazine. We're gonna put out a call for interns. Because the editors that are with us, they started as interns. They interned with us, and they loved what we're doing, and they stayed on, right? So yes, what you need to set up a magazine, you have to get a team first, right? You have to think of your teams, and your teams always come. The team comes from your own immediate circle, which is something I learned from Rob Spillman. Reached out to the people you know, people you've worked with. So when it started. I reached out to my immediate circle. I reached out to Kenichi. I reached out to Tracy. I reached out to Rebecca Jemison. I reached out to Megan Bross, the South African poet. So we started with that team. Some of them are now staying on as contributing editors. As contributing editors, they occasionally come in because they have other engagements. They have so many things going on in their world. So, but occasionally they come in and they suggest a work for publication. They read. Yes.
Right.
So what you need is a team. If you're able to put together a team, that takes care. Like the financial issue is fixed, like it's constant, right? But the most important thing is having your team. Once you have that, and then you can define your publication circle. Would you want a general submission format, or would you want a themed format? How many times?
So does that determine what kind of team you want to set up? If you want to do a general
No, it's still the same thing. What the themed issue is you want a response to a particular central question, right? Like you have the
So what I'm asking is does the type of submission you want to receive determine the type of team you want to set up?
It doesn't necessarily do that because the editors are just the editors. They're already conversant with the form. So it's what you're then doing is how to make their life easier. Because if you're publishing just quarterly issue, so they have time in between to rest and other things. You know that maybe I can dedicate 6 hours to Isele per month. They can do that, right? because it's the structure is defined in a way that allows them to just do 6 hours a month. But if you have a general issue that publishes every other month, what you're demanding their time every month, and it's easy for them to burn out, right? So but if you're publishing twice a year, they have long time to do. So you can decide, maybe you're publishing every June and every December, right? You have a conversation with them in January, and then you put out a call. You all can come back and read in March. You've done all your acceptances and you do your acceptances and send out rejection at the end of March, and then you start editing from April to May, that 1 month. So, and also what also determines how much easier you make their life is how many stories and how many poems and how many essays are you publishing. If you have too many on the list, you're giving them too much work, because editing is not just editing one at a go and sending out. You have to have conversation back and forth, because there are certain writers that you make suggestion for and they say, no, I don't agree with this. So you have to reach a compromise. So which is time, right? When we started with general submissions without any themed issue. The theme started December 2020 with our woman issue. So then we had gotten a team of our interns who joined us. That was when Yvonne joined us, and she championed that issue. That issue was fabulous. She joined us as an intern then, and I'm like, no, I'm not letting this woman go. She's incredible. I'm not letting Yvonne go. So Yvonne now, Yvonne is an amazing human being. So so that's when you're starting, first your team, and second, how many times a year are you publishing? How easy will you make the life of your editors if you have to make short stories? So even the length of the stories, maybe 3,000 words, 4,000 words, it's easier to edit. Having like a 9,000 word story or 8,000 word story, you can take that time to edit 2 more stories. How many stories will you have in one? And then how are you even reading? How are you reading? Do you insist that they read every submission in full? And maybe they can read halfway to determine, oh, this is not working. If I've got to this point and it's not working, then the story is not working, right? So you have all those in-house conversation. But what is key for me is organizing a team and then deciding how many times your publication cycle. And then the amount of work you will have in each cycle. That will determine how long the editors stay with you. Because if you constantly give them more work, someone like me, where I'm teaching, I'll leave after 2-3 months, right? Because I'm too burdened with academic and service work. Yes.
What about the production aspect of things, like websites and editing and marketing and publicity and all those types of things? How do those things factor into your structure?
Yes, I mostly handle that part because I'm already demanding. It's already demanding a lot from our editors with reading, accepting, editing, preparing, doing line edits, preparing for publication. So in terms of publication itself, we have dedicated editors who go in to upload the material, to choose the image that will go with each publication. So we do that beforehand. We decide on the images, we upload, and then we schedule for publication. Then also we have the issue of the designing the cover, because both the general and the quarterly issues, they have this, they all come with covers, right? And the content page, the list of the writers who are appearing in this issue. So Yvonne designs but she's an artist too. Yes, she's an artist. She designs for the quarterly issues. So we get an image and we have to pay for the design. I mean, this is art we're talking about now, right? Yeah. So she does that incredible work. We have a call for art that we accept for the general issue. So when we select, I will design the cover. So I have tools, resources I need to put together, because I already have the art that we get from submissions, and then to now design the cover. Then with publishing, we do the publication and then publicizing it. Then on social media, we have the person from my own circle who does that on Twitter, does that on Facebook, does that on Instagram. We've been a bit lazy on Instagram lately. On Twitter, we are very active on Twitter and on Facebook. So we have dedicated, like, the person's job is just to be posting those stories, like posting them. When they notice a conversation about Isele somewhere on social media, they amplify that. They go somewhere, or someone says, "Oh, where do I submit my work?" The person is able to track all that conversation. So we continue to, enlarge our outreach. So we have dedicated, the person's job is just doing that. It has nothing to do with editing and all that. It's just publicizing our work, which in essence is also marketing, even though there's no money involved. And that's part is just being active on social media, knowing where the conversations are happening, and So yes, so that is currently how we run, having that dedicated team. This is what they are doing with editing. Once and knowing those, I do most of the administrative work, like with payments, and it's the Yvonne does a lot, and Tracy does a lot of collating who we've published, reaching out to them to get their payment address or info if you're going to remit through PayPal or Venmo or Zelle or World Remit. So they collect all that information. Both of them, they collect it and then they send to me. So when they send to me, then I now have to say, okay, then this is when I can pay, right? So we tell the writers will pay at the end of the month, which essentially is when I get my pay. So we start sending all that out. Occasionally there are instances where you realize, oh, we haven't paid this person. I missed somebody. So the writer will contact, and then you have someone returning, hey, you missed this payment, and then to go through the Excel sheets to be sure that you've done the work. So all those little administrative.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of details.
Yes.
A lot of details.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and kudos to you on every single thing that you achieve. So this is my second to the last question. What have you learned about yourself through this process?
I've learned that I'm a workaholic.
I can believe that.
I learned that I can do this for the rest of my life, right? I just wish someone would pay me and tell me, okay, take this $2 billion and don't do anything else with your life. Just sit down and be editing Isele Magazine. I will happily do that. But I do love teaching. I enjoy being in the classroom. So, but what I've learned with this process is that I love a good story. There's this, maybe it's a bit of narcissism. There's this that happens when someone reads a story published in Isele and they're like, this is a good story. I'm like, yes, I edited this story.
I did that.
I edited this story. And then occasionally you go through our stats and you see universities. You see students, when you see .edu,
you know that schools are talking about what's happening on Isele.
They're talking about it, and there's a bit of narcissism there, and it makes me so good.
I think it's pride. It's well-deserved pride after doing so much work.
Yes, when Yale University, they archived, they include us in their list of African journals in the archive, like where to go get African writing, African literature. So Isele Magazine is there. So I like to tell people Isele Magazine is archived at Yale University.
Yeah, that is a very good part of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I talk about that a lot. And then a few days ago, an airline in Nigeria reached out that they would like to have our writers featured, in their magazine. I'm like, this is good, right? But then nice. I want our writers to be it's still an ongoing conversation. I want our writers to be paid. Like, we're not just pay them, but I'll still talk to them. But so what I realized is that it gives me so much joy doing this, because yes, I sometimes tell myself that I am an extrovert. I want to be out there in the world, but I really want to sit down and just do this. And I work a lot. When I'm not working, it's almost like
something's missing.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, something's missing. No, this is not. Something is missing here.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, I totally get that. That's exactly how I feel about my work. So I'm 100% with you there. So final question.
Okay.
If audiences could describe Isele in one word, what do you hope that word would be? Just one word.
Beautiful.
Oh, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, because I think it also goes to the origin of the name itself. Yeah, so it's actually my late grandmother's alias. Yeah,
Wow.
she was a performance poet in the early
Oh,
60s, before the war, and she was so famed that she would go from village to village, town to town to go sing and perform, and they were calling her Isele,
wow.
Isele one. Isele it's a very exuberant name. It's almost like, in Nigeria, it would be equivalent of saying Shakara.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. So it's in my language, so they call her Isele, Isele wise. There's so much beauty, there's so much flair, there's so much, even a performance of it, the
Yeah.
beauty of it, the performance of it. So whenever I envision Isele, I see her, I see that celebratory atmosphere that is beautiful. So yeah, I hope it continues in that vein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ukamaka.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on the show. I had a wonderful time
Thank you.
chatting with you, and I can see why the magazine is exactly how it is, because you're such a powerful force, behind it, and you've put together a wonderful team that's also doing all the behind the scenes work. And I wish you so much success in the coming years. I didn't get to ask you what you are looking forward to because we're running out of time. But I know that it's gonna be more wonderful news.
More things coming next year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do you wanna tell us a little?
Yeah,
A few things.
we post our best of Isele anthology. So we've just had one print.
Right.
So because of scheduling and financial issues, we paused that, but we are reviving that next year. So Isele is coming back in a good way, in a very and good way. Yes.
Awesome. On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.